Today, in case you didn't know, marks International Day of the Air Traffic Controller, and we salute the many controllers who are part of the safe landing process of every single commercial flight. To help us explain a bit more about what the work of air traffic controllers entails, joined in studio now by the Executive of Air Traffic Management and Communication, Navigation and Surveillance, quite the title, Jeoffrey Matshoba, who's in studio with us. Thanks very much for coming through to the AM Report. It's great to have you on. It's, as a start, a 24-hour job. I've just described how incredibly stressful it is, but perhaps let's get that obvious question out the way. What does the job of an air traffic controller actually entail?
Okay, thank you very much, Ayanda, for having us. As ATNS, we pride ourselves to be contributing to the safe and efficient air traffic management in the country. So what we essentially do as air traffic controllers, their primary objective is to provide a separation between aircrafts as they fly, aircrafts as they land, and between aircrafts as well as vehicles on the ground. So you will appreciate that when an aircraft is flying, the view of the pilot it's very limited in terms of seeing where the other aircrafts are. So the risk of collision in the absence of an air traffic controller, which is an ATC, is very high. So therefore, that's where we come in. We provide that particular separation between aircrafts to make sure that they don't collide, they fly away from each other, but safely to their destination. We use men and women to do that. They work 24/7, as we have indicated, in some stations, and we use technology for us to be able to provide that safe and effective air traffic management in the country.
Yeah, and typically at any given point, how many aircraft are you watching? I mean, are you just assigned a particular commercial flight making its destination from point A to point B, or is it more of a bird's eye view of the entire situation with multiple communications? Put us, I guess, in the shoes of an air traffic controller.
Yeah, I'll try to simplify it, although it's a bit technical, but in essence what we do in the year 2018-2019, we pushed about just under 1 million total air traffic movement in the country. Joburg is the busiest airport in the region, pushed half of that. But obviously with COVID-19, the air traffic movement has sort of decreased. It's been halved by the COVID-19, the restrictions. We use what we call sectorization. So in OR Tambo, as an example, we call it the Johannesburg terminal area. So what we'll normally do is we will dissect the airspace. The airspace is round, it's a circle over OR Tambo, but we'll sectorize it and then have various types of service that we're providing. One service that we're providing will be the tower control, that we term it. It's essentially providing a service in the vicinity of an aerodrome, and as an aircraft goes higher, it gets into the terminal airspace and the en route airspace. The en route airspace is the high flyer, where they provide separation between aircrafts from here to Cape Town, as an example.
And I guess perhaps the sectorization might answer my question in part. On the ground, we see specific demarcations. There are clear lines, there are traffic signs, there are red zones, islands that people nonetheless still disobey. Are the rules the same in the sky? Are they figurative or imaginary pathways, so to speak, that aircraft need to travel in order, I guess, to make your job slightly easier in the complex procedure that you've just explained?
Yeah, the aviation is highly regulated. So the chances of non-compliance is very slim, mainly because the safety is critical to the operations of aircraft. So yes, we've got what we call pathways. We call them ATS routes, air traffic service routes. So it's an imaginary line up in the sky, and it's the straight line from here to Cape Town. So just to give you an example, traffic transiting Johannesburg to Cape Town. And when I say Johannesburg, I include Lanseria, Vonneeboom, going to Cape Town. They use what we term ATS routes. You will have one-way route from OR Tambo to Cape Town, one-way ATS routes coming back from Cape Town to OR Tambo, one-way ATS route from Lanseria to Cape Town, and vice versa. So in essence, we've got about 6 ATS routes servicing OR Tambo as well as Cape Town. That route used to be the 11th busiest route in the world, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And typically, can you have more than one aircraft on the same route? I imagine that would work if they're going in the same direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the aircraft at any given time, they need to be 1,000 feet apart at any given time, or 5 nautical miles apart. So you need to maintain that. That's what we call the air traffic service standard separation. So if we infringe that, we call it a safety event, and we've got measures in place to ensure that we don't infringe that particular 1,000 standards as well as the 5 nautical miles standard. So from here to Cape Town, you've got a different altitude. The aircraft will like to fly higher to save fuel. So as an example, the lowest altitude an aircraft will be flying from here to Cape Town, they are starting at about 20,000 foot. And then from there you add 1,000, you stack them up. You can have about 10 aircraft on top of each other, and they're safely managed and guided through our pathways.
Wow, that's fascinating stuff. Typically, I also understand what the job entails is being able to make decisions quickly. You know, I guess that's the stressful part of the profession. Do you have an example where you've had to do that, where you were faced with the predicament and you needed to decide quite quickly on the safest possible outcome for everyone involved?
So the easiest example that I can give is when an aircraft are taking off from a particular airport. So in a busy environment, they will taxi, what we call taxiway. They will drive to the holding point where they start to roll and take off. So it will be a sort of a queue up to the holding point, one following the other. And then at the same time, you have others landing. So you need to make decisions depending on the distance of the one that is coming to land, when to launch this one. So it's a decision that is made by an individual air traffic controller at that particular time. Jeoffrey Matshoba, as an executive, has got nothing to do with that decision. It's a decision made at that particular time by the controller. So you need to be on the alert, you need to be vigilant, you need to make sure that when that aircraft that is approaching, when it hits a particular distance, you hold on to the ones that needs to be released. And that's a critical decision that an ATC has to make. Hence, it's a very stressful job.
Yeah.
The other issue is crossing of vehicles, doing the maintenance on the runway. An air traffic controller provides separation between aircraft as well as vehicles. So you need to also make sure that when do you allow a vehicle to cross the runway?
A lot of pressure. I'm glad I'm not involved in that kind of work. But, you know, we still nonetheless do find ourselves in instances where there are unfortunate events, right? I can't necessarily remember an accident taking place because aircraft are colliding in the skies. But I guess in history, have had some of those instances. Where do you think the situation goes wrong when something like that happens? I know there's a whole spectrum of possibilities. But, you know, insofar as a traffic controller's job is concerned, in what ways could they be implicated in perhaps making the wrong call?
Yeah, it's an issue of what we term it the readback. So an air traffic controller issues instructions to the pilots. He will tell the pilot when to climb to a particular altitude. And at the same time, he's providing the service to other aircraft. So he expects the aircraft or the pilot to read back correctly what he has issued as an instruction.
Right.
So as an example, I will say climb to flight level 190, whereas the pilot will think or will interpret as 290. And in that way, he's infringing or climbing through the altitude that he's not supposed to climb, and is obviously violating the distance between the other aircraft. So, but we do have measures in place, and that's exactly that, the issue of readback. So an ATC has to issue an instruction and listen whether the aircraft or the pilot has understood that instruction. So those are the measures that we put in place to make sure that we don't have the collisions. Yes, there are mishaps there and there, where you clear an aircraft to land whilst forgetting that there was a vehicle doing the maintenance on the runway. We also have the systems that will alert us to say, you have cleared this aircraft, but there is someone on the runway. The pilots also, they've got the role to play to say, because they are listening to all the instructions, if you issue a wrong clearance, they've got the responsibility to challenge the instruction that you're giving them.
Fascinating, fascinating stuff. I am out of time, but I think it'd be remiss for me not to ask, how best do you think we should be remembering air traffic controllers today? I imagine this is one way, obviously, we can do it, highlighting what it takes to pull off the job. But do you imagine there being any misconceptions about what you actually do?
Yeah, the misconceptions, it's the ones that I normally make, that immediately when you say air traffic controllers, they're thinking of those guys on the ground. So that's one misconception. And the other misconception is the air traffic controllers, they are highly paid personnel. That's another misconception. We try to look after our air traffic controllers as much as we like, but it's not that issue of they are highly paid. It's a very stressful job. We try by all means to look after our air traffic controllers, but please remember our air traffic controllers as one of the personnel that they have risked their lives during the COVID-19. They made sure that they leave families, they go to work, they get exposed, they return to their families, they expose their families. Please remember them, that during COVID-19, they provided essential services to the Republic of South Africa.
Absolutely, and a critical service at that. Thank you so much for coming into the studio, helping us better understand this profession, which I would say sometimes sadly gets lost in the shadows of what it takes to get an aircraft in the sky and have it land safely, I beg your pardon, where it's going. Jeoffrey Matshoba is the Executive of Air Traffic Management, as well as Communication, Navigation and Surveillance. Jeoffrey, thanks very much.